Good morning, honorable members. Let us pray. Guide, we beseech thee, Almighty God, members of the Houses of Parliament, that they may wisely deliberate for the good of the country and for the glory of thy holy name. Please join with me as we say together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Pray, be seated. Honorable members, let me welcome you to the joint sitting of the Senate and House of Representatives. At this time, we are ready to move to the next item on the agenda.
Pursuant to Standing Order Number 12 of the House of Representatives and Standing Order Number 10 of the Senate, this special joint sitting has been summoned to celebrate the life of the late Honorable Elvin Nimrod, former Deputy Prime Minister and parliamentarian who passed away on February 6, 2021.
Item 3, motions.
Honorable Prime Minister,
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, honorable members. Mr. Speaker, I rise to move the following motions standing in my name. Whereas Elvin Nimrod died on the 6th of February, 2021, and whereas Elvin Nimrod was an outstanding gatekeeper of the public interests, especially so to the constituents of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, and whereas the Honorable Elvin Nimrod served the state of Grenada as Prime Minister in the absence of the Prime Minister on various occasions, exercising good judgment and demonstrating always a well-formed disposition to act with integrity. And whereas Honorable Elvin Nimrod was a paragon of the virtue whose contributions in the field of foreign relations have advanced the interests of the state of Grenada, And whereas the members of the Senate and of the House of Representatives assembled at this special sitting of both houses of Parliament are desirous of honoring and paying their respects to the said Elvin Nimrod for his esteemed public service, for nurturing the highest principles and practices while in the service of the Parliament. And therefore, be it resolved that at this special joint sitting of the Houses of Parliament held at Mount Weldon, St. George's, this 16th day of February 2021, hereby recognize the substantial contributions made by Honorable Elvin Nimrod as a resolute parliamentarian and an exemplar of erudite principles acknowledged throughout the region. And be it further resolved that at the special joint sitting of the Houses of Parliament of Grenada, we express profound sympathy to the family, relatives and friends of Honorable Elvin Nimrod, and honor him for his humble and distinguished service to the people and the government and Parliament of Grenada.
Senator, the Honorable Simon Steele.
Speaker, no, the Leader of the Opposition.
So we just want to associate it.
Yes.
Associate it.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, just a mistake.
Mr. President, I rise to associate the Senate with the sentiments of the motion read by the Prime Minister.
Senator, the Honorable Christiali.
Mr. President, I beg to sit.
The Prime Minister.
You have to give away the...
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, out of respect to the distinguished service of Elvin Nimrod, to the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, I deemed it prudent to have the first tribute for this joint sitting of the Honorable Houses of Parliament be done by the present representative of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. Before I do this, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, let me also take this opportunity to express my deepest sympathy to the Honorable Leader of the Opposition on the passing of his mother, and whom I have heard will be in fact buried tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, I yield to the present parliamentary representative of Carriacou and Petite Martinique.
Honorable Representative from Carriacou and Petite Martinique.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, honorable members of this House, I rise this morning to proudly pay tribute to my mentor, my political father, my predecessor, my friend, my Kakabawe brother, the Honorable Elvin G. Nimrod of blessed memory. The Honorable Elvin G. Nimrod left us for his heavenly home on the morning of 6 February 2021, the 78th year of his birth. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, This is indeed a very sad time for me, and one of the saddest times in our history, as we, especially the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, mourn the passing of a stalwart, a son of the soil, a brother, a true friend, a true patriot, a loving kayak. It is extremely difficult for me, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, to sum up in this short tribute, or even in a long, eloquent one, the Honorable Elvin Nimrod's contribution and his impact and his love for his beloved Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. I know that there are people who knew him longer, and therefore there are also people who may have known him even better than I do. But I can say, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, that I am proud and honored to have known this goodly gentleman, my real Kakabawi brother. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Elvin Nimrod, as he told me, entered into politics because he felt the need and that deep-rooted desire to enhance and to improve the lives of the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. For him, it was not about money, nor the glitz or the glamour, for I have come to realize that there is nothing like this in this thing called politics. For him, therefore, it was about sheer service and sacrifice, finding a way to give back to the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique in a meaningful way, the land of his birth, to his country and to his people. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I therefore pay tribute today to Honorable Elvin Nimrod because of his unwavering and selfless commitment to the people of the Twin Island constituency of Carriacou and Petite Martinique for 19 unbroken years. I honor Honorable Elvin Nimrod today for his patriotism to the state of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. I praise Honorable Elvin Nimrod today for his humanity and humility to his fellow human beings in this country, in the region, and in the world as a whole. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, during the time our brother spent on earth, he followed faithful the words of his school song, his alma mater, the Grenada Boys Secondary School. And I quote from the second stanza: "To be in the van is not all, for each has to play his role. The team wins the match at football, though one man must kick the goal." Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, my brother Nimrod, was an excellent team player who placed the love for the people above any form of individualistic or narrow political interest. He was truly an objective person, truthful, sincere, committed, and charismatic. The women of Carriacou and Petite Martinique fell in love instantly with our dear brother. Our country has indeed lost a rare gem. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Elvin Nimrod was a true Christian, a devoted member of the Anglican faith, who followed strictly the instruction of our blessed Lord, as spelled out by the prophet Micah, and I quote, "What does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humble with your God." Verse 8 of the 6th chapter. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Nimrod did all of the above. It is no secret, therefore, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, that Brother Nimrod gave all, literally all, to the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, for which he was deeply respected and loved by many. He once said that he was prepared to die for the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. And we believe, and we continue to believe, that he would have done just that. Throughout his tenure, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Minister Nimrod ensured that the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique received our fair share of the national pie, as he would say. He fought with vigor and passion for us and literally made us felt as legitimate children of the state of Grenada rather than outside children, as we sometimes felt. He gave us, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, that sense of belonging, that identity that was lacking for some time. He gave us hope, and he made us believe in ourselves, especially our young people. He has inspired so many, including myself, to go further, to excel, and to give back to our respective communities and our country. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, his many good deeds were never really publicized. However, there are countless recipients of his quiet generosity and his compassion. Many can attest to how his personal intervention in their lives helped to ease their troubled minds. The struggle, the hopes, the challenges of the people of the constituency of Carriacou and Petite Martinique became his. And he carried this weight. He carried this with grace and with poise. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, when parents from Petite Martinique were finding it difficult to send their children to secondary school because of the added expenses of a boarding house or a monthly board fees, Brother Nimrod introduced the free school boat for all school children of Petite Martinique that was going to secondary school and Tamsisi in Carriacou and Petite Martinique. Mr. Speaker, this was a game changer for the people of Petite Martinique. And as a result, what we saw a turnaround, a marked difference in the number of dropouts that was being experienced by the children out of Petite Martinique. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, imagine that as of late of 1997, the people of Petite Martinique was without police security. There was no police station in Petite Martinique. An important thing such as a police station. It took Brother Nimrod and the new National Party to bring security to the people of Petite Martinique. He did so, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, facing the stiffest of opposition. There were many days of unrest and demonstration led by the operatives of the NDC. And Mr. President and Mr. Speaker, amid all the chaos and confusion, Brother Nimrod stood up and he demonstrated strength and courage. He stood up against the enemies of progress and delivered police security to the people of Petite Martinique in 1997. It's the same police security, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, that is now leading the fight, protecting our borders in Petite Martinique as we continue to keep our borders safe as we fight the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, as late as 1997, there was no designated site in Petite Martinique for garbage disposal. There was nothing in place to collect the garbage produced by households and by businesses on the island. This was a disaster that was waiting to happen. Mr. Speaker, the people of Petite Martinique were disposing their garbage in gullies around the island. The garbage was finding its way in the sea. The garbage eventually became a threat to the land and the sea. And you know, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, the sea is the main source of livelihood for the people of Petite Martinique. It was again, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, the Honorable Elvin Nimrod who recognized the problem and put structures in place, garbage disposal and collection for the people of Petite Martinique. The garbage from Petite Martinique is now transported to the landfill in Carriacou. But, Mr. Speaker, this brilliant idea again encountered opposition from the enemies of progress. They were saying to Brother Nimrod, well, if Petite Martinique's garbage could come to Carriacou, then Carriacou's garbage should go to Grenada. But strong and resolute fighter, Brother Nimrod, he stood his ground, and today Petite Martinique is one of the cleanest communities in the state of Grenada. Further, Mr. Speaker, the people of Petite Martinique now have access to clean, potable water in their homes, their businesses, and their farms. Mr. Nimrod, as a result of the installation of the desalination plant on the island of Petite Martinique, which fully connects all of Petite Martinique with running water, is solely responsible for this advancement. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I am sure you now understand why we, the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, say that Minister Nimrod was a true champion. He was a warrior. He was a fighter. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Nimrod was also responsible for the establishment of the Ministry of Carriacou and Petite Martinique Affairs and Local Government, a ministry solely dedicated to serve and advance the interest of the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. The ministry gave us, we, the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, a greater say, a greater involvement and participation in the handling of our own affairs, and this we continue to guard very jealously. Carriacou and Petite Martinique, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, is the only constituency in the state of Grenada that has a ministry of the constituency. Minister Nimrod made it quite clear that Carriacou and Petite Martinique must not and cannot be treated as just another constituency as on mainland Grenada. And he ensured that through the establishment of the Ministry of Carriacou and Petite Martinique Affairs. This ministry, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, has brought and continues to bring various services, various programs, various projects and policies, all geared towards the uplifting and improving the lives of the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I used to look forward personally to Minister Nimrod's budget presentation every year and to witness the pride and the excitement that beamed on his face during his presentation, especially when he spoke of the many lengths and feet of roads, bridges that was being constructed throughout the length and breadth of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. As a result, therefore, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, we in Carriacou and Petite Martinique can now boast proudly of having one of the best road network in the state of Grenada at present, and I make no apologies for that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, he also built schools, notably the Hillsborough Government School. He built health centers. He built community centers. He built resource centers. He built a market. He built a home for the aged. He brought new government vehicles to Carriacou and Petite Martinique. And some of you may think that is a small thing, but to us, that was a big thing. Because what we were used to then was the reject that the other ministries in Grenada did not want. But Minister Nimrod stood up, and it was the first time we saw new, brand new, with the plastic on the seats, coming to Carriacou and Petite Martinique. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, he was responsible for the construction of the Lauriston Mini Stadium, the first of its kind in Carriacou, where young people are usually engaged in many different sporting competitions and other activities. Although, Mr. Speaker, that which really stands out to me the most is what I would call the education revolution Minister Nimrod started in Carriacou and Petit Martinique. Mr. President, sir, Mr. Speaker, it was under the stewardship of Minister Nimrod and, of course, the new National Party that poor people, children in Carriacou and Petit Martinique got scholarship and many opportunities to study abroad, especially in Cuba. It was under Minister Nimrod that young people in Carriacou and Petit Martinique got an opportunity to study at tertiary institutions around the world. It was under Minister Nimrod that young people realized the true power of education. And you know, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Minister Nimrod knew exactly what he was doing. Because if you look around in Carriacou today, what you would see is the many engineers, the many architects, the many teachers, principals, public servants who went abroad and studied, and they are now contributing immensely to our development in various leadership and other capacities. He was undoubtedly, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, a man of great vision. And I know that Fidel Castro would be pleased. He would be happy to see how the assistance that he rendered to Grenada, how that benefited a small community, a small island as Carriacou and Petit Martinique. Minister Nimrod, therefore, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, believed in the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique. He believed that we could have looked after our own affairs, and therefore he invested, of course through the government, in the development of the human resources of our islands. He made it his duty to ensure that the people was adequately and sufficiently exposed to higher learning and training, which, in my view, is now responsible for the growth and development that we are now seeing in Carriacou and Petit Martinique over the last few years. Mr. Speaker, I can also speak of the Chinese low-income homes at Dumfries in Carriacou. And I am being advised that originally 70 units were mapped for Carriacou, only 70, because it was felt that there was not a need or greater need for housing of the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique. However, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Minister Nimrod further negotiated with the donors, and he was able to secure not 70, but 100 units earmarked for the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique, which is due to be completed very soon. And Mr. Speaker, if you give me the opportunity, I can go on and on and on for the morning, but I would not. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, we are often reminded that actions speak the truth that is deep within our hearts. The Honorable Elvin Nimrod has for decades spoken a language of love through his action, with honor and with dignity. He fulfilled his mission and commitment to the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique. The poet Helen Keller wrote, and I quote, "The best and the most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart." End of quote. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, the people from the constituency of Carriacou and Petit Martinique felt the love of our dear brother. And when I say we felt it, we really did feel it. The question is, therefore, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, how do we honor a man like the Honorable Elvin G. Nimrod? How do we honor a national treasure, an icon, a titan? We in Carriacou and Petit Martinique owe a debt of gratitude to the Honorable Nimrod. And we will, as a government and as a people, honor his life and work in the most fitting ways in the coming days and months. Finally, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, sir, I believe that it was William Shakespeare who wrote in The Merchant of Venice, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the world is a stage where every man must play a part. Well, our brother, Elvin G. Nimrod, has played his part. He played the role of son, father, husband, brother, friend, teacher, lawyer, politician, and citizen. And in each of these roles, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, he would have done very well. I personally thank him for his support, his guidance, his stewardship, and of course for setting that foundation for my political success thus far. Mr. Nimrod has left an indelible mark in our hearts, and his name will be remembered and be called in the nation for many generations. I express my deepest sympathy to his wife, his children, his siblings, family members, and of course to all the people of Carriacou and Petit-Martinique on his passing. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, like you, I do pray that he has found the eternal life with God that he so richly deserves. May the soul of our brother, Elvin G. Nimrod, rest in perfect peace and rise in glory on that resurrection day. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition to make his tribute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, I too rise to pay tribute to our brother, the late Elvin G. Nimrod. But before I continue, Mr. Speaker, let me express my deepest and sincere gratitude to my fellow colleagues and members who have expressed to me the sympathies on the passing of my mother. And I can tell you today that she will not be buried tomorrow, but she will be buried on the 26th of February at Petit-Martinique. And I think we're going to celebrate her life then. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I sat here and, just to change the scope of things. And sometimes we give praise to people after they pass on. I got to know Brother Nimrod in the early 90s, 1993. And as the member for Carriacou and Petit-Martinique delivered, I was saying this is a hard act to follow because she mentioned almost everything. But as I sat there, I'm saying that I'm sitting in this chair today because maybe Elvin G. Nimrod contributed to my sitting there. And the reason why I said that, Mr. Speaker, as a young activist in 1993, 94, 95, 96, we found ourselves on different sides of the aisle. In his debut in politics, he was not a supporter of the NNP. As a matter of fact, he was the one that promoted an independent candidacy in Carriacou. You might have heard about the wheel. And so he was the wheel. But I said I am standing here today because I believe that the leadership of the New National Party, myself, Brother Williams, that is Danny Williams, Grace Duncan, Mark Isaac, we all made overtures to Brother Nimrod to come on board. That was in 1994-95. And he adamantly said no, that he would not come. And so I'm thinking that if he came, I would not even venture to be in politics because at the time I was probably so small and so scared. But he promoted a vision for Carriacou that is still lasting today. In that he said to me in our discussion then as a youth that imagine 2 prime ministers came from Carriacou, H.A. Blaise and Nicholas Brathwaite, and he cannot understand why Carriacou is not getting its fair share. And that was his mantra, the fair share for Carriacou and Petit-Martinique. And not only fair share, he developed also the mantra for local government. And that was Elvin G. Nimrod, in getting more for the people of Carriacou and Petit-Martinique. And within the government, you could always hear that he wanted more for Carriacou and Petit-Martinique. You cannot put on a program in any ministry where he did not ask for a little more. If you gave Carriacou 10, he wanted 50. If you gave 100, he wanted 150. So he advocated Carriacou and Petit-Martinique getting the fair share. But I love to go back a little bit, Mr. Speaker, to the 1995 election. And when, even going down to the wires, we were trying to get him to join the NNP, he would not. Then the leadership of the NNP, Dr. Mitchell, called me and said, Tobias, you would have to run because Elvin G. Nimrod is not going to take up that mantle. And I said to Brother Nimrod, I said, this is difficult for me, but if I have to run against you, I will run against you. So in 1995, Mr. Speaker, I went up, it was Elvin Nimrod, Joan Purcell, Michael Caesar, Winston Fleury, myself, and Lyle Bullen on a stage in Hillsborough Government School. And I'm there as the young one, you know, and we really, really bat it out then. And when I was finished, he says, Toby, you know, you surprised me. You could hold your own. I said, well, when I'm standing with the NNP, I would hold my own. And it so happened election came, and he said to me, you don't worry about me, because where I am, I will be the linchpin. And what do you mean, linchpin? He says, NNP gets 7, NDC gets 7, and I'm in Carriacou. Then I will be the prime minister. He said to me, that is what linchpin really meant. And do you know, he come really, really close. Maybe I think separating in 1995, it was about 19 votes. And then I said to him, you see, if you had joined with NNP, you would have won. But then I look at him and I said, probably, I believe you can negotiate because there is always room in the house for you. And I know negotiation was taking place behind the scenes. And there is another joke. Again, I think he was sworn in on the 1st of April, 1996. And Winston Fleury with a hoe in the market and said, this is our April Fool's Day. So this is where it goes. But I do believe in his time, he taught me a lot in terms of lessons. And he said to me, Tobias, in my serving, nothing comes from it but the service that you give to people. When all is said and done, what you leave is lasting memories. And I reconnected with him again in 2006, and then he introduced me to, he was in foreign affairs at the time, and he said to me, Tobias, whenever you get to go to China, the wine of choice is Dynasty. Make sure you come. If you bring me back anything from China, bring me back the bottle of Dynasty. But then at the end of his day, he said to me, he has served, and he is proud of his service to the people of Carriacou and Petit-Martinique, and especially that of Grenada. And he said, what I would like to do now is maybe go to my house, and the sea is just out there, to throw a line to fish. I do not know how much this materialized, but I can say today, I do believe in his service to the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique and Grenada, he served with honor, he served with humility, and I do believe he was satisfied at the end of the day that he gave it his all. So I stand here in the footsteps of my Kakabawi friend, that he stood for what he believed in, even though when it seems as if there was no hope in it, because I told him there is no hope in an independent candidate, but he stands his ground. And so as I stand here and reminisce of the times that we had together, I say, fly on, my good friend, fly on, my Kakabawi friend. May we meet again on the other side in heaven someday. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Fine. So you have just 4 minutes to make a tribute, 4 minutes, so that we can complete on time.
Honorable members of the Senate, the presiding officers are part of the debate process. We have certain privileges, and I will wish to use 1 minute of that privilege to say a word in respect of the Honorable Elvin Nimrod. Honorable and the most distinguished Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Mitchell, Leader of Government's Business, Senator Simon Steele, Deputy President, Senator Christy Ali. Honorable members of both houses, I'll be very brief. This morning is one of the few moments in a life of almost 30 years in the Parliament that I can say that I have been profoundly moved. The Honorable Kendra Mathurin-Stewart, when she spoke, she gave a very succinct but very detailed trajectory of the life of a profound and unique Grenadian individual. I just want to share a brief moment in my walk along his life's journey. I had not known him well at all during the many years, but I got to know him when he became and held the portfolio of Minister of Labor in 2013. At that time, I held the position of General Secretary of the Caribbean Congress of Labor as well. And we worked very close together. I remember that very noteworthy and famous meeting of labor ministers when we at the level of the Caribbean Congress of Labor was able to get back on board within the heads of government setting, and it was the second labor ministers meeting, and we both met in Nassau. And I discovered a Grenadian patriot who had never divorced himself from working people. When the matters on the agenda were to be discussed, and this is the minister who acts as Prime Minister, I heard this knock on my door. And when I answered, it was the Honorable Elvin Nimrod who said to me, and once somebody calls me Chess, I know that it's business, but in a very gentle and touching way. And he said, Chess, I want to discuss the agenda items the minister is going to be discussed because I want your input in it. And I was really moved by that, and I gave him the programmatic platform of the CCL, and he single-handedly carried that platform in the meeting amongst his ministers, and we got quite a number of significant things done, including the undertaking to set up a labor desk at the CARICOM Secretariat. Many may not know it, but in May of 2013, when May Day activities were held in St. David at La Sagesse, a matter that we have struggled for years, Nimrod, in addressing the crowd, said that I wish to announce, and it is my pleasure to announce, that the cabinet to which I belong has taken the decision that from here henceforth, all workers who are retrenched and are to receive severance pay arising from retrenchment, no income taxes shall be applied to that payment. And I was deeply moved by this because this is something that the labor movement have been struggling for the better part of 25 to 30 years. And without a placard, without a sit-in, without a sit-down, without keeping silent, the workers of this country received one of the most profound benefits that we had been seeking for many years. And I bring this to the record because, as I said before, Evelyn Nimrod never departed from the roots of the working people from which he came. May his memory be forever cherished and a rightful and fitting place be found to sustain recognition of his contribution to the people first and foremost of Carriacou and Petit Martinique, but also to the people of Grenada. Honorable members of both houses, I thank you for your indulgence. Senator, the Honorable Simon Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to open by extending my condolences to the Leader of the Opposition on the passing of his mother, and extending those sympathies to you and your family. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, this is truly a fitting tribute to our colleague and our friend who served Grenada, and in particular Carriacou and Petit Martinique, selflessly and with such distinction. When I look around this chamber, his influence, his fingerprints are over many of us here. Many of us would not be here if it was not for him. But I will let others speak of their experiences. I will speak of mine. But I cannot speak of my relationship with Alvin Nimrod without speaking about my father, Kervin Steele, and his relationship with Alvin Nimrod. And it follows on from the tribute given by the opposition leader. And I had the opportunity to speak to Alvin before he passed. I had the opportunity to thank him for his support and the opportunity he gave me to contribute to the development of this country and our party. And it is that last conversation, or one of our last conversations, I wish to share with this chamber. And as I said, it dovetails in with the comments from the leader of the opposition. In thanking Alvin Nimrod, he shared with me a story that my father did not even share with me, and spoke of the debt of gratitude he had to my father in terms of influencing the political path that he took. And their story dates back to schoolboys in Carriacou. My father is 3 years older than Alvin, and I had the privilege, the 30 years I knew Alvin, to share some of those conversations in my parents' backyard. Alvin always requested my father make him a fish broth. My father makes one of the best fish broths I think anybody would ever eat, and it was the amount of conversations we had around that pot in my parents' home in Hillsborough. But their story goes back to their childhood. They returned to Carriacou around the same time. My parents returned in 1992, Alvin shortly after that. And they would share conversations. My father and Alvin had a similar vision for the development of Carriacou and Petit-Martinique. The member for Carriacou and Petit-Martinique eloquently ran through, and I won't repeat it, where Carriacou was back at that time, unrecognizable to the Carriacou we have now. Carriacou had the reputation of having the worst roads, not just in the entire Caribbean, the state of our hospitals, clinics, schools, the lack of opportunities for our young men and women, this drive within him for Carriacou to get its fair share. That statement rings with me and of all of us, those that served in cabinet, that served in the field with him, and what drove him. My father met Alvin, it was at Scrapers Bar Restaurant in Harvey Vale in 1994. Alvin was soliciting support. He was running as an independent, the election which took place in 1995, and was soliciting my father's support. And this conversation about this shared vision and understanding where they were, where Carriacou was at that time, Petit-Martinique was at the time, and knowing it could do so much better. But that conversation did not only lead to my father's support, a vote for him as an independent candidate. The wheel, I think I even have a T-shirt, a yellow T-shirt with a wheel on it. I think I still have one at home. But what he got from my father then served as his campaign manager in that 1995 election. My parents committed, and a long list of those that served alongside him in that 1995 election. And the stories that I've heard from that, of all the elections that he fought, I think that was probably the sweetest for him, despite the fact that he lost. And the number I have in my head is 13 votes that he lost by. But this isn't the story. This isn't the story I want to share. That I knew of. What he shared with me, one of our last conversations, was he was under intense pressure. He knew of his convictions. He was being courted by the NDC. He was being courted by the New National Party. But he was popular, and he wanted to stand by his convictions. This was in 95, just before the election, a contingent, it had Kent Joseph, Joan Purcell, and Dr. Francis Alexis came to Carriacou, met with him and my father in the downstairs of his home in Hillsborough. And they were trying to convince him that he must run on the NDC ticket. They wanted him. And they demanded that he make a decision there and then. Alvin admits to feeling that pressure. He wanted to serve Carriacou and Petit-Martinique more than anything. And he knew if he went on the NDC's ticket, who were the incumbent in office at that time, he would have been assured victory. My father saw that pressure. And this is a story not from my father, but from Alvin. My father intervened and just said, hold it. His words were along the lines of, you're asking a man to do a U-turn on a busy motorway. He cannot give you an answer at this time. That gave Elvin sufficient time to pause, to think, and he did not give them an answer. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, what evolved from that is now in our history books. He did run as an independent, but he was having conversations with all. He saw the bigger picture. He saw where the future, if he were to win as an independent, what good would he serve without the resources? He saw the vision of the new National Party, even though he ran as an independent. And those conversations were taking place in the background. And he knew whether he won or lost, that he will end up in the bosom of the new National Party. But having that time, that pause to reflect, to think, and then move forward, set the path and the career, the very bright career that he had. Carriacou today, as I said, is a very different Carriacou and Petit Martinique to what it was back in the early 1990s. His legacy is now set in stone, a building block that the member for Carriacou and Petit Martinique continues to build on. But it's a legacy that would last for generations to come. And before I end, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I think it's also important to recognize his children and his wife, Donzel, who has supported him through thick and thin, the ups and the downs. We look at the sacrifice of us on the front line, but we often forget the sacrifices of those who are providing the support behind. And in this very, very difficult time, I wish to reach out in this very public forum to his wife, Donzel, and his children, I said, at this difficult time. But I think we can all stand proud of his achievements and the legacy that he leaves behind. May his soul rest in peace. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Honorable Parliamentary Representative for St. Andrew Northwest, yes?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, it is with a heavy heart, but at the same time, with a profound gratitude, having come to know the man and learn from him, that I stand here today to pay homage to a fallen colleague, Honorable Elvin Nimrod. Minister Nimrod, who graced this parliament for almost 20 years, will always be remembered as a true and faithful servant of the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique. There goes a representative in whom they can be justly proud. As much as he was a champion for his constituency, he loved his country and was dedicated to his party. He was an MVP of the National Executive and served well in various portfolios. I had heard a lot about the Honorable Elvin Nimrod before I came into politics. But Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I got to know him well from 2007, my first campaign. What struck me about the man is his amazing temperament. I cannot recall ever seeing him angry. He always had a smile, especially when he wanted to get something for the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique. He had a kind of pitiful disposition, and he will come Dello to ask for more, or Emo, he gives you a name when he wanted more for the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique. The current housing project in Carriacou is a case in point. The fact that Carriacou is receiving more units than was on the original plan was as a direct result of Minister Nimrod's representation. In fact, I recall he coming to me saying that 70 for Carriacou, but I trying to explain that Carriacou does not need as much as the mainland. But what he did quietly, even though when I decided to stick with the proposal, he had a discussion with the Chinese ambassador who came back to say that he's the deputy prime minister and therefore he needs to get 100. And so Carriacou is having 100 units very soon. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, maybe two words can best describe him. Quietly determined. It was that determination and a certain clarity of vision that first led him to challenge the status quo and almost won as an independent candidate as he announced himself in the 1990s. It was that determination that allowed him to bounce back from his near loss in 2003 to eventually consolidate his status as the best MP of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, maybe since adult suffrage. As one of the younger members of the Parliament, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, and Cabinet, I can proudly say that I have benefited numerous times from his counsel. He was never too busy to share his wisdom and his advice, and I am a better MP and minister because of that. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I am honored to stand here today to be able to call this giant of a man a friend and a colleague. Let me express condolences to his wife, children, family members, and supporters on my personal behalf, my family, and the people of St. Andrews Northwest. Go take your rest, brother, a good and faithful servant of the people. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Representative for the Andrews Northwest.
Senator, the Honorable Nolan Cox.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my support to this resolution that seeks to pay tribute. I'm not certain that one resolution might be sufficient to pay tribute to such an individual for his contribution to this beautiful nation of ours, and most specifically, Carriacou and Petite Martinique. Mr. President, I too, as a Carriacouan, my colleague, Senator Steele, Minister Stewart, and of course, Senator Clement, Honorable Clement, opposition leader, truly understand what this means to us. We clearly knew where Carriacou and Petite Martinique was before the tenure of Elvin G. Nimrod. And we see the contrast in terms of the results after he made his mark. And I think those are the things that stand out for us as Carriacouans and Petite Martiniquans. And it was said here this morning by Minister Stewart, his love for Carriacou is one that can never be questioned. His actions really, really, truly depict that love. And that is something that each and every Carriacouan can agree on, that he really demonstrated that with his actions. My colleague a while ago said that she never seemed upset, but I think if you only deny Karaku something, I think you will see him upset. That is something that, probably the only time that he'll be upset, when he didn't get something that he truly believes that Karaku deserves. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I don't believe that anybody in politics now can say that Elvin G. Nimrod didn't have something to do with where they are in politics, from Karaku and Peter Malik. And I am too one of the persons who must be grateful for his involvement or intervention in me being in this honorable house today. It was a short plane ride on a Friday after coming from a meeting with the Minister for Health. And a phone call on Sunday morning as I was doing my chores, daily chores, sweeping, cooking, preparing. And by Wednesday of that following week, I was sitting in the Senate as the Senator for Karaku and Peter Malik. So that was the turnaround time that it took me to get here. And all that evolved because of a conversation that we had on Sunday morning, where it's something that I've said to him over and over. I'm always grateful for that conversation. We had a conversation as a father speaking to a son, and not as a politician trying to get somebody to get involved in politics. And that conversation will always remain with me. And I too hope one day that I will have an opportunity to pass that conversation on to somebody else to impact their life in that manner. And that I must be truly grateful for him giving me that opportunity to be here today. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Elvin G. Nimrod was a formidable politician, a formidable individual. He clearly knew what he wanted, and he went after it with every bit of strength that he had. He was very convinced and confident in whatever he wanted to do, be it personally, politically, or otherwise. But Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I think a critical aspect of how he became our representative had to do with Karaku, not just Karaku in the state, but Karakuans in the diaspora. And I think that is the genesis. The discussion started there. And I want to also recognize Karakuans in the diaspora at this point in time for their contribution as well, in their giving them the nudge to come home and to make that representation. I think a lot of that is being missed, that he had not just tentacles here, but he had a strong reach and representation in the diaspora, where he was well respected and, of course, adored in many ways. So I really want to highlight them this morning. In terms of involvement with the people of Karaku and Peter Malik, he always participated in cultural, sporting activities. He has always been there. He has helped a number of persons quietly. And they know. The persons know themselves. And they understand the contribution and support that he had continued to make throughout their lives, more so for the children. One of the things that has always been said that no one is perfect. But Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, there is nobody who could have been more perfect at being Elvin Nimrod than Elvin Nimrod. With those words, I want to express my deepest sympathy, not just for myself, but my family, to his family, his kids, wife, and also his brothers in Carriacou and other family members. I know it's a difficult time for them. It is something that we all cannot never be accustomed with, losing a loved one. I believe that he has left us with enough memories that will help us to get through this difficult period. And as such, we must be grateful for his contribution to this nation, to our people. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I want to say thank you to all the members and to his family for giving me the opportunity to be here to pay this tribute this morning. It's a special and sacred time for every one of us who understand what we have lost. With this, I want to say, may his soul rest in peace. And may each and every one of us continue to cherish him in our hearts as we move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker. I stand here this morning to pay tribute to our deceased ex-Prime Minister and Minister of Government, a colleague, Honorable Elvin G. Nimrod. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I would like to start my tribute with a quote from Buddha, and I quote, "Even death is not to be feared by one who has lived wisely," unquote. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, it is my belief that Elvin Nimrod did in fact live wisely. Indeed, he chose one of the noblest of professions. He became an attorney at law. And I was speaking with one of our most seasoned lawyers sometime last week. And this is what he said to me. He was one of the sharks, as John Public refers to readers of that profession. Albeit, he was a good shark. He was a powerful attorney at law. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, serving as the MP for Carriacou and Petite Martinique for 4 terms in this honorable house, Elvin was certainly able to skillfully craft and influence legislation in this parliament. And by extension, he developed and lifted his native island and its inhabitants in the process. He had style. 19 unbroken years of service to his people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. I recall, Mr. Speaker, every Monday morning in Cabinet, he will lobby for projects and programs for Carriacou and Petite Martinique. He wanted to always get his fair share of the pie. That is something, that word, he used all the time, that phrase. He left no stone unturned. If he didn't get an answer this Monday, the next Monday you'd be back again with the same thing. Mr. Speaker, I served with my friend. I personally liked him. And colleague, as a member of the New National Party and a minister of government. And Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I can testify that it was a very edifying experience. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, when I reflect on the fact that Elvin Nimrod entered politics in 1997 as a senator and retired in 2017 as a minister of government, I cannot help but conceptualize his life as one of almost perfection and completeness. I heard one of my colleagues use the word perfection. He started on the 7th, 1997, and he ended on a 7th, 2017. Biblically, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, and you would know that, Mr. Speaker, of course, the number 7 connotes completeness. After 7 days, God has completed his work and created the world. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Elvin Nimrod was a friend to all. He was a true politician. There's no doubt about that. When I heard him speak the first time, I said, my goodness, I think I spoke to the Prime Minister. I said, I never knew he had such talent and such strength. The Prime Minister said, well, you know Nimrod. He was a statesman and deported himself very well. It is often said that the measure of a man is how he treats his people, and he certainly treated his people well. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I stand in this noble place to say farewell to my friend and colleague with a tearful eye. I say journey well, rest well. Your advice will live on and will continue to resonate through the halls of this noble house for decades to come. I want to express my sympathy to his wife and the rest of his family, and also to the family of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. I must say that because they loved him well. They loved him and he loved them as well. Farewell, my brother, until we meet again on the other side. Thank you.
Shall we go over to the Senate?
Senator, the Honorable Roland Bolo, unless you wish to defer to...
No.
Go ahead.
Not for very long. Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, colleagues. I too stand to give my support to the motion that's been presented and to associate myself with most of what has been said before about our friend and colleague, Brother Nimrod. I can only add to what has been said before, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker. I never knew Brother Nimrod until I, too, joined the political arena. And like most of the colleagues who spoke before me, I had my own time and share of teaching from him. As a matter of fact, it was from a visit I made to Carriacou and had some personal encounters with him that he shared a book he had with me, which I read, and I remember the name of that book being All Politics is Local. And that had opened up my eyes to a lot of what I did not know about politics as a young politician coming into the political arena. And I believe, from what I read in that book, a lot of what Brother Nimrod stood for and the fight for his people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique came from his reading of that script.
because he always felt that unless you were properly grounded locally within your constituency and with your people, your politics was probably senseless. I remember Brother Nimrod as a gentle soul, always with a smile. I think our dear sister did mention she never saw him with an angry face. And I can never recall any encounter with him where he was very angry, but always found a way to make your time with him very cheerful and memorable. He always had a way of making you smile with something he would say, even when he was most serious or the situation was very critical. He has done his best, I believe. Most of those who associated ourselves with him can today stand here and proudly say that I believe we did not regret knowing him as a friend and having him as a colleague and as a brother, whether it was within the cabinet or in the parliament or even as a party member. He always had something to share that became very memorable. And I do believe his memories would live on for a very, very long time. Many of us would miss those moments with him. Many of us can continue to testify what we learned from him, what we saw in him, and what he made us believe that we needed to do as young politicians. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I do not believe that there's a lot more that I want to add to what was said and what will be said again about his life and his time on this earth, or even his functions as a politician or as a lawyer. I do hope that his family and friends, and of course the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique in general, will find the strength to remember him for who he was and what he has done for them. And that his soul may rest eternally in peace. But as I come to an end, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, of what I have to say, I also would like to join to publicly at this time express my sympathies to the Honorable Tobias Clement, leader of Her Majesty's opposition, on the passing of his mom, who incidentally, they're all from the same area, Petite Martinique. And we know too that you are going through a tough time, but that the love that exists in Carriacou and Petite Martinique will be equitably shared with you and the family of Brother Elvin Nimrod. May their souls all rest in peace, and I do hope that we will continue to be guided by the cherished moments that we had with him while he was here with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I too join my voice to pay tribute to the Honorable Elvin G. Nimrod, our fallen hero, and I start by expressing deepest condolences to the family and friends, and also the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. It is indeed a sad moment for all of us because we have lost one of our national heroes. And over the course of his distinguished life, we can all admit that Mr. Nimrod made enormous sacrifices and contributions towards the development of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. He was a well-respected statesman and left an indelible mark, especially on the islands of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, as alluded by the current MP. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Nimrod's leadership and visionary approach to politics indeed marked the pages of history, a page that I am prepared to read closely as a young politician. I remember eagerly awaiting his parliamentary contributions because of his unique voice and his passionate delivery. And though I missed the opportunity to work alongside him, his profound and impactful life has paved the way that I can emulate in my political career. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Elvin G. Nimrod came, he saw, and he conquered. May his soul rest in perfect peace. Thank you.
Senator, the Honorable Christopher Bialy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I rise to associate myself and my private sector with the sentiments expressed on the passing of the Honorable Elvin Nimrod. I myself have not worked closely with him, but I knew very much of his quiet demeanor and very persistent love for Carriacou and Petite Martinique. So I'm very well aware of that. So to the family and sons and his wife, I express the deepest condolences on his passing from myself and my family, and may his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bialy.
Honorable Parliamentary Representative for St. Andrew Southeast.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President, I rise this morning to extend my condolences to the family of Honorable Elvin Nimrod, and not just his biological family, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, but I believe to him, every person from Carriacou and Petite Martinique was family, and I extend my condolences. Sir Speaker, Mr. President, so much has been said, and I do not want to rehash all that was said. I do associate myself with all the comments from my colleagues, but I want to say it was an honor to have known this man. Not just an honor to have known him, but like many others, I can safely say he has positively impacted my own life, and particularly, I'll add, my political life. Memories of him, Mr. Speaker, I would just relate two of those. One person, besides Minister Nimrod, called me Emo. One other person that I know, my late grandfather, and he never met him. And the first day he called me Emo, I actually asked him, how do you know this name? But I learned to realize after that there was always a reason when he called me Emo. And it had nothing to do with my grandfather, Mr. Speaker. There was always a request that was following Emo. And that was him. I listened to him in cabinet, Mr. Speaker, and all my colleagues would relate to that. There was a tone that he went down into when he made a request on behalf of Carriacou. You couldn't find any place in your heart to say no. And then the Prime Minister would quietly respond, okay, colleagues. And Mr. Nimrod has his way. Mr. Speaker, he was very strong in his views of the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, their needs, and he left no stone unturned wherever he spoke of them. But, Mr. Speaker, the one thing that was not mentioned before that I want to end with is his hospitality. There was always an invitation to the cabinet. When you come into Carriacou, whatever is happening, who is coming up? And not only that, Mr. Speaker, he said it and he proved it in his action. He would always say, the red carpet would be laid down. He always followed with that. And Mr. Speaker, as colleagues, when we visited Carriacou, from the airport on arrival to our departure, there was something about Minister Nimrod's presence. There was something about his hospitality that was surpassed. And I don't even think I can walk in those shoes. It didn't matter how many of us came up on that flight. Everyone left from the airport to his home. And he would serve breakfast, he would serve lunch, he would take care of you with the red carpet, as he would always say. Mr. Speaker, I never knew about traveling in a government vehicle when you went to Carriacou. Minister Nimrod would let everything that he owned be yours during that period, and he extended that courtesy to all of his colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to travel with him once, and I was amazed. I thought this love that the Carriacou people expressed was something unique to those who were in Carriacou and Petite Martinique. And he was invited to a function by people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique in New York. And the truth is, I was a very young politician at the time, still very young, but just got into politics. And the truth is, I was shocked, I was amazed at how these people welcomed the Honorable Elvin Nimrod. He loved people, and I think people loved him just the same. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to associate myself with the resolution that was read earlier by the Honorable Prime Minister, and to share my 2 words on passing of Elvin G. Nimrod. Elvin G. Nimrod was a gentle giant and a true patriot. He was committed, he was hardworking, but above all, he exuded humanity and humility. No one who went to him with a genuine need was turned away without him trying to assist them. And he needed no credit. And he didn't take any either. He was true to his constituents, and as you have heard before, so true. He always placed them first. For him, the Sister Isles were his world. He was there for them, and of course, they were there for him. Hence the reason why he was the parliamentary representative for 19 consecutive years. Brother Nimrod should be emulated. And when I listen to his successor, Sister Kendra Matrin Stewart, I do believe the people of Carriacou are in good hands at this point in time. His was the kind of representation that you could believe in. There is no doubt that his contribution to the development of Carriacou and Petite Martinique is his greatest legacy and will always be recorded in the annals of our history. For me, Mr. MP, as I fondly called him, was a friend, a mentor, and a genuine and gentle soul. I will miss that signature smile, his designer dark shades, and his strength of character. To his family and friends, and of course to the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, please accept my deepest sympathy. May the fond memories of our dearly departed brother bring you solace in this time of mourning. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Garvey. Honorable Parliamentary Representative for St. Patrick East.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, I rise to share condolences with the family of Minister Elvin Nimrod and the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. There is not much that can be said to help make their loss any less, but I sympathize deeply with them and will miss him as well. It is indeed a difficult time for them, and I wish they find peace and courage as time progresses. May they find strength and compassion, and also comfort in knowing that he lived a life his way. I was blessed to know him and work with him for a very short time. He was a great man. Though brief, it was an honor to know him. What stood out more than anything else to me was the way in which, when he called me Pamo, he warmed my heart and encouraged me to do what it is that he wanted. Mr. Speaker, he was able to transform Carriacou using that skill, persuasive words, charming smile, and with a very powerful demeanor, he was able to solicit help for his people. Actually, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, I believe he was an expert solicitor in every matter of the word. I truly admired how he got what he wanted. Fair share for the people of his islands. May the memories of Elvin Nimrod continue to bless our hearts, and may the family and people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique feel proud of the great contribution he made to the lives of others in our tri-island state. May he rest in peace.
Thank you.
Senator, the Honorable Andrew Lewis.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the labor movement, I pay tribute to former MP, Honorable Nimrod, who also served as Minister for Labor. And because we like to be sure on what we are saying, even yesterday, before I came here today, I rang Robin, one or two colleagues, and the common sentiment is that our experience, and I say our experience to include myself, in appearing before him at the Ministry of Labor, we found him to be fair. We do not have to agree with him on every matter, but we found him to be fair and non-aggressive, very accommodating. And therefore, we pay tribute to him and also extend our deepest sympathies to his families, his friends. And permit me also at this occasion to publicly extend sympathy to the leader of Her Majesty's opposition, Honorable Tobias Clement, on the passing of your mom. On behalf of the labor movement, we extend our condolences once again to the families and friends and loved ones. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you, Senator Lewis.
Honorable Parliamentary Representative for St. George South.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Elvin G. Nimrod left us on February 6, 2021. I met Brother Nimrod in 2012 and became friends and colleagues from then onwards. An astute parliamentarian who represented his constituents and country to the best of his abilities, always. I remember the numerous occasions that I received his good counsel. He usually had a point of view that was steep in tradition and experience he had gained through the years of his political career and the life he lived, particularly his connection to the diaspora and his roots in Carriacou and Petit Martinique. His endearing smile and his sense of humor would fill the room and lighten the mood. His family were the people of Carriacou and Petit Martinique, and he lived for them. He protected and looked out for them always, and pushed to do better for them, and ensured Mr. President and Mr. Speaker, ensured that they got their fair share, and proudly, wherever possible, more than their fair share. Today, Brother Nimrod looks down on us from above, able to say that he has left his mark on this beautiful nation. The people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique are better today because of his representation and leadership. Minister Nimrod stood toe-to-toe with the greatest leaders in the world and represented with pride Carriacou, Petite Martinique, and Grenada, proudly with no apologies in that order. A kayak to the bone, eloquent at his Shakespeare Mass, and proud of his kayak culture. A statesman in stature, speech, and action. Brother Nimrod is at peace now. He lived respected and has died regretted. He is now reunited with his dead daughter, whose passing took a severe toll on him. Rest in peace, dear Elvin, in the warm embrace of the Lord and your loved ones that went before you. May his family also find peace in the Lord, assured that he is with the Lord above. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, may I also take this opportunity to offer my sincere condolences to my dear friend and brother, Brother Tobias Clement, on the passing of his mother. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Steele.
Senator, the Honorable Patricia Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I would like to extend my sincerest condolences to the Honorable Leader of the Opposition on the passing of his mother, which is an unimaginable loss for many of us. So we wish you comfort and strength in this time. Mr. President, Honorable Speaker, I also support the motion, and I associate myself with the sentiments expressed by members of this Honorable House. I would like to express my condolences to the family, friends, colleagues of Honorable Elvin Nimrod, especially the members of his constituency of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. Now, I did not know him personally. In fact, I never met him. But growing up, whether you followed politics or not, you knew the name Elvin Nimrod. And his name was synonymous with Carriacou and Petite Martinique. His name was synonymous with eloquence. He was noted for his manner of speech. And as evidenced by the presentations of the members of the House today, his name was synonymous with service. And we would like to thank him for his service. And whether we know it or not, young politicians such as myself are here today because of his contributions. As a long-standing member of the NMP, as a long-standing member of government, a former Minister of Foreign Affairs, the ministry which I'm a part of currently, I am sure that his influence would have formed the functioning of these institutions and would have influenced the ethos of politics in Grenada. So I stand here today with others as a beneficiary of that, of his influence. And may his family and colleagues be comforted in knowing that his name will be etched in the annals of history as a great person, a great leader, a great politician, a great servant. It struck me especially when Honorable Minister Mathurin mentioned that he said he would die for his people. That kind of conviction, that kind of passion for service is rare. And I think that is something we should all try to emulate. So he was indeed a servant not only to his country and to his people, but at that level of service, at that level of passion, you're a servant to God. You're doing God's work. And therefore, I would like to end my tribute with a poem entitled Servant of God by James Montgomery. And it says, Servant of God, well done. Rest from thy loved employ. The battle fought, the victory won. Enter thy master's joy. The voice at evening came. He started up to hear. A mortal arrow pierced his frame. He fell, but felt no fear. The pains of death are past. Labor and sorrow cease. And life's long warfare closed at last. His soul is found in peace. Soldier of Christ, well done. Praise be thy new employ. And while eternal ages run, rest in thy Savior's joy. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Williams.
Honorable Parliamentary Representative for the Tongue of St. George.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I address the motion, I'd just like to join others in extending to my colleague, Honorable Tobias Clement, my sincerest and my family's deepest condolences to him on the death of his mother. May her soul rest in peace. Mr. Speaker, I fully endorse the motion as presented by the Prime Minister. With respect to my colleague, friend, Comrade Elvin Nimrod, when persons such as Elvin dies, we must pause and reflect, not only because it brings us face to face with our own mortality, the fact that we will pass on, and it does that to all of us, because Elvin was one of us. It also causes us to reflect on our own lives. Everyone, Mr. Speaker, has a dream. We all have dreams, all of us. Some of us pursue the dreams, and some of us, even less of us, actually achieve those dreams. We all have a dream, we all hope to pursue the dream, and we all hope to achieve the dream. Elvin Nimrod achieved all three. When I met my friend Elvin, in fact, we called him Mopsido, and many of his friends in Cairo call him Mopsido. When I met him many years ago, in around 1991, 1992 in New York, he was about to embark on the journey for the fulfillment of his dream. He was just on the cusp of that. We met in New York. I was visiting New York at the time. On my way from London, coming back home, and we both went to Trinidad together. He was practicing in New York for many years. He was living in New York for many years. And his dream, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, as he always expressed it, was to return to Carriacou and to serve Carriacou and Petit Martinique in Grenada. After spending many years in New York, among the New York community, the Grenada community, Carriacou community in New York, he believed it was time for him to return, time for him to go back, time for him to pursue further, to achieve his dream. And he did that relentlessly. Just about the time we were traveling to Trinidad together, so we traveled to Trinidad, about 6 of us who were old, mature persons practicing law who wanted to come back home but had to go to Trinidad to pursue the 6-month course, and we spent 6 months in Trinidad together. And we did a lot together. We hung out together. At the time, Magistrate Seals was there, and many other friends was there, pursuing the same course. And we developed a tight bond of friendship, not only between me and him, but between his family, my family. And he was well known to my parents, my brothers, and so on and so forth. I was on the way to Grenada from London, where I studied law, and I just happened to pass through New York, did the New York exam, got through the exam, but intent on going home, I went to Trinidad immediately, fearing that I got stuck in New York or London. And as fate would have it, we finished the course, and Mopsido said to me, Peter, why don't you come in New York and spend a year and get a little practice? He was on the way home too, and he was going to come home in a year or two. He said, come New York with me. I'm on my way home. I'm close to home. I'm in Trinidad, but I went to New York with him. And as fate would have it, he spent 2 years with me in New York, and I ended up spending 10 years in New York practicing law. So he got home before me. But in those 2 or 3 years that we spent in New York together before he came back to engage, we did a lot. I practiced with him. I was in his office for those years. And I got to know him very well, and I got to know his team. And as my friend Senator Cox said, he was deeply, deeply entrenched in the New York Carriacou community. And I want here to pay tribute to some of them, because those are the persons with whom he communed in order to prepare his path back to New York, back to Grenada. I want to talk about persons in what was called then the Nimrod New York Support Group. And I'm sure the persons in Carriacou are well aware of the names, because it was those persons that he came back with. People like Donald Matheson, Dennis Beck Gay, Cyril Sylvester, Desmond Jones, Linky John, his cousin, Wilson David, George Joseph, Winston Olivier, Felix Coy. Those and other persons, they were the team that he formed in New York on the way back home to Grenada. At the time, not heading to join the NNP or any to do anything in particular. He was coming home to serve, because that was his dream. He was now embarking on the pursuit of that dream. And it's from there that he headed to Grenada. In his first speech, I remember in Brooklyn, New York, in a place called the Junction in New York, he announced his return, and always somebody who quoted John F. Kennedy, particularly where Kennedy said at one point, think not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So that was his dream, that was his pursuit, and he came. Upon his return, his achievements, well, we heard from the member for Carriacou, we heard from many other of his colleagues. I'm sure we'll hear from the Prime Minister on much more details, having spent so many years with him. But certainly, he achieved in Carriacou what his dream was. He represented the people, he served them well, and he did, as someone said earlier, his legacy will live on forever in Carriacou. With respect to foreign ministry, I think that he's one of the best of our foreign ministers over the many years. I think he's the longest serving, if I'm not sure. I don't have the actual data on all the foreign ministers. I believe he was the longest serving foreign minister. But I think his major contribution, if one stands out in my mind, is his work done in reestablishing relations with the People's Republic of China. As the foreign minister at the time, of course, on a policy set by the Prime Minister and the government, he pursued that policy, and I think his establishment and his work on re-establishment of those relations will stand out as a major achievement in Grenada's history of foreign policy. And in fact, the relations with that country has continued to be one of the most deepest and relations that has led to benefits for our country, and Elvin Nimrod was at the center of that. But he had many other contributions in foreign affairs, and I'm sure there will be other tributes given elsewhere, but that one in my mind stands out. His many contributions to Carriacou and Petit Martinique will be documented and are currently being documented. On a personal note, we had great times in Trinidad. Elvin loved to have a good time, but he studied hard, and he was a serious student, as we all were in Trinidad. I remember our struggles in the Parliament of Grenada, the years when there was 8-7 in the Parliament. It was You know, one of us had to go last before the leader of the opposition and the prime minister. One of us always had to go last. And we were always going at each other. But what stood out for me is that when we left Parliament, it was Mopsido and Pedro. We were good. I remember once. But over the years, we had these issues, ended up going last. And I would somehow get to last. But Mopsido, this one time, he worked on me. As it was coming down to the end, he disappeared from the hall. So we assumed he left because he had an emergency. So when it came down to me, I stood and I started speaking. 5 minutes after which Mopsido waltzed into the room and said, "I catch you today." He was such a competitive politician that he wanted to go last, and he did everything possible to go last so he could go after everything I said. But we remained extremely good friends up until the last. So, Mopsido for me, and again, was one of the persons who made my entry into the NNP smooth. He came to me, we spoke, he guided me, he told me where the mines are laid and I stayed away from the minefields. He told me where the water is nice and I swamped those waters. He was guiding me through this process. And I am very, very grateful to him for that, because it has turned out to be one of the most successful and one of the best decisions I took at the time, and Nimrod was at the core of that. I thank him for that. Brothers and sisters, Mopsido had his dreams, he pursued his dreams, and he achieved his dreams. I pray God that he died with a smile, knowing that his dream of leaving Carriacou in a better place than he met it was fulfilled. I pray for his family, and I wish them well. I pray for all of his friends, all of his colleagues, and I thank the Parliament for paying this tribute today to somebody I call a friend. I thank you.
I rise to associate myself with the sentiment shared by my colleagues. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, the life of Honorable Brother Elvin G. Nimrod is not just going to be celebrated, but it serves as a deep inspiration for young people like myself who has a great interest for politics. Looking at his life, Mr. President, in fact, growing up, I can remember when we have conversations about politics, especially around the election time, you will hear the conversation that about some safe seats that is considered to be NNP safe territory. And you will always hear Carriacou and Peter Martinic come up in the conversation. But history will teach us, Mr. President and Mr. Speaker, that when you look at the data, in fact, you look at 1984, and NNP at the time had 84% of the votes there. You look at 1990, and it declined significantly, 1.5% of the votes cast. You look at 1995, well, my brother Tobias, leader of the opposition, 6.5% of the votes cast. But in 1990, you see a trajectory of an increased vote of which turned that seat, that probably would have been considered a lost seat based on the two election, become a very safe seat. And the question is, as a young politician, how he managed to do that. And even today, we are benefiting from the spoils of his labor. And Mr. President, he was able to do, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, he were able to do that because of his commitment to the development of Carriacou and Peter Martinic, because of his commitment to the people of Carriacou and Peter Martinic, when I heard the list of achievements that he was able to accomplish in Carriacou and Petite Martinique, I understand why Carriacou and Petite Martinique has been able to be considered a safe seat for the new National Party. And Mr. President, one may argue that he could have decided not to join. But it's also because of the philosophy and the vision of the new National Party at the time, which he ascribed to, or subscribed to, which contributed as well, propelled his vision towards the development of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. I've learned a lot about his achievement, not just sitting here and hearing about it, but also in conversation with friends like Mr. Donald Matheson, who will always give me that story, especially the 2003 situation where we would have basically, I think by 6 or 7 votes. And Mr. Matheson will always give me the story of some words that was uttered to the opponent when they was going over the recount. And it also shows, Mr. President, that this man, Mr. Elvin G. Nimrod, was a hero. Was a hero for the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, was a hero for the people of Grenada, and was a hero for the young people of this country. And certainly, Mr. President, reading his book, his life, it is certainly an inspiration for young people like myself. The new generation of politicians, Mr. President, needs to study the life of people like Honorable G. Nimrod and how they were able to do it. This is a field that is based on service, and he was able to live up to the expectation. And so, Mr. President, I want to say Elvin Nimrod is an example to us as young people that we can follow. He was a true statesman. And Mr. President, I want to say this to his family, condolences to his family, to the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. And Mr. President, the final song, I can remember when he was, when the baton was being passed on to Sister Kintra Maturin Stewart. That song, I always remember that song. And Mr. President, I think it fits very well. The lion sleeps tonight. And so, Mr. President, I know, Mr. President, his contribution to this country is one that we remember. And as a young person, Mr. President, to most young people, in fact, I can remember as well, before I close, when the news broke about his passing, one of my good friends who is also a lawyer, most young lawyers will say that he's one of the favorite politicians. I guess as much his legal mind was one of that stimulated their thoughts and the interest in politics. And so I close by saying, may his soul rest in peace, and he will forever be remembered for his contribution to this country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I rise with a very heavy heart to support the resolution as presented in this honorable House, and to say farewell to a dear friend, to an advisor, a mentor, Elvin G. Nimrod. It took me a long time to know what the G stood for, but I think we all know now that it is George. Mr. Speaker, before I go any further, I just want to extend condolences to his family, his immediate family, and the Carriacou family, and to all his friends, people who knew him in a special way. And also to my dear friend, Honorable Tobias Clement, on the passing of his mother. Mr. Speaker, Elvin G. Nimrod, even as we celebrate his life, there are so many things that can be said about this gentleman. And as I listened to persons, I was just deleting so that I can keep what I have to say fresh and new, but I find out I'm out of new things because everybody knew him so well and everybody had a lot to say. But I know he was a brave and visionary person. Mr. Speaker, to leave a lucrative job in a place like New York with lawyers. Perhaps they make more money than Grenada, I'm not sure, but he had a lucrative business, as was said by one of the members before me. And to come home, yes, he had a support group, but to run as an independent in a country where you had two parties, there are some countries where you can run as an independent and remain as an independent and still get benefits to do what you have to do. But we all know that it is difficult in our setting, but he did it. And he came in 1995, and he worked his magic, and he did exceedingly well, even though he lost. But it had his performance showed great promise. And Mr. Speaker, persons alluded to the support group in New York. They all, as was related to me, when he lost, they left and went back. But Elvin George Nimrod, he stayed because he had a vision and he had a purpose. And he wanted to do for his constituency, the precious constituency of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, but also he saw the bigger picture of what he could do for Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. So when he became a senator in 1997, on the 1st of April, on the 1st of April, that is the date, that's the time that stood out to me, the 1st of April. And persons were saying 96. Okay, I got 97, but 96. 96. And so they were saying, well, Kit Mitchell making Papi show with you by 1st of April. But he had his eyes set on the sights, the bigger picture, and I guess the Prime Minister will speak to that. But what I want to say is in this, that this proved to be a game changer for NNP as a party, for Carriacou and Petite Martinique and Grenada. And Elvin George Nimrod learned how to combine his allegiances to all of these and make it work, and not let us feel that anyone was being shortchanged, any side, whether the party, whether his constituency, or the country was being shortchanged. Mr. Speaker, persons again mentioned the budget, and Elvin Nimrod would let everybody go and say what they had to say. And when he took the floor, everybody had a smile and a waiting because they knew we were going to get some friendly fire. And it was fire nonetheless. And as was said before, he had a way of getting what he wanted. But Mr. Speaker, what I remember most profoundly is the period 2008 to 2013, when we were in opposition. And there were 4 of us. 3 of us are here in this honorable house. And sadly, Elvin George Nimrod is no more with us in his physical state, but he will always be there because of the legacy that he has left behind, because of the indelible footprints that he has left. They cannot be erased. But thankfully, he has ensured that his legacy continues by the selection and recommendation of a very competent successor in Sister Kindra Maturing. However, Elvin George seemed to flourish in adversity. He liked go trouble. And that is where he was at his best. So when there were 4 of us, we were like 15. And those who are in this honorable house who were part of the government at the time, they knew that they had unleashed a lion when they lost the election. It's funny how you lose, how you win, but you lose in the house every time Nimrod stood up. And of course, with Dr. the Right Honorable Kit Mitchell and me and Brother Bola backing up, the 4 of us really put up a battle. And Elvin George Nimrod, and you heard it from Honorable Peter David, in that fight, he prepared himself. He would research, he would read, and made sure when he came his word ready, and even up to the last,
He would be writing, he would be doing something. He just wanted to make it perfect. And Elvin George Nimrod defended the new National Party in the House as not many could be said to have done in any one time over the years of politics in Grenada. And I remember him in that fight. And I also remember subsequently when he made a presentation and Prime Minister said, but I didn't hear the fight. He said, but Prime Minister, there's nothing to fight for. We have 15. And that was the man. He quieted down when he didn't need to fight. But when you needed a defender, when you needed a backer and a supporter, Elvin George Nimrod was the man to be there behind you. Mr. Speaker, a lot has been said about his work in foreign affairs, and so I would not say much except to say that his involvement in restoring relationship and strengthening relationship with China has resulted, one of the things I remember, he left Grenada, nice and warm in December, and he went to China in the coldest of winters to do his foreign affairs work, to do the bidding of the government, and very importantly, one of the things he did was negotiate for the housing projects. As I remember, I think it was 2,000 houses, and he came back with that and more, but he was always proud that he was able to negotiate shelter for the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. So while some people who came on subsequently was saying, we have to give up the 2,000 houses to get something else, Elvin Nimrod, when we came back in office, went back again and ensured that we got the 2,000 houses, and we also got stadium and other things for Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. That is the nature of the man that we know as our friend. Mr. Speaker, his love for culture. I almost erased it because I thought some others would have said it. But I remember the first time I saw him perform was just across the government house. He brought down a whole battalion of Carriacouans because they're having their thing up there in Carriacou, but he has to bring down a whole side. And he brought down the cultural people doing the dance. What is the name of the dance? The big jump dance. And that man backed his jacket and he performed with those people with excellence. You know, Elvin George Nimrod knew how to be up there with the best at the very top in the United Nations, wherever, defending the policies and the philosophies of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. But he knew how to meet his people on the ground and perform with them. It was no wonder that he had unbroken the Shakespeare Mass, the serenading during Christmas time. He was there with the people. And that's a lesson for all of us to learn, that we cannot leave the people who put us there behind. And when we falter, I think we must have the image of Elvin Nimrod, dancing with the people, serenading with the people. We have to be, if you want to be a politician, that is where you have to be. You have to be here, but in order to stay here, you have to be there, dancing with the people. And Elvin George Nimrod knew how to dance with the people. Mr. Speaker, a number of other things have been said, so I'll keep it short. And I know other tributes would be paid. But I just wanted to end with one thing. I know if he was here today, he would take the vaccine. And if he was here today, he would be encouraging Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. The vaccine is our best option now. Let us take it. Let us save Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. Let us save the world. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, let me just begin with a few words from the code book, which reads, "For what is your life? It is a mist that appeareth for a brief time, and afterwards will vanish away." Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I too associate myself and my colleagues with the sentiments expressed in the motion presented. Let me also express my sympathy to the former Minister Elvin Nimrod, and let me also take the time out to express sympathy to the opposition leader who would have lost his mom. Already did that via the telephone and did it in person when we first came to the chamber. But, Mr. President, let me just say a few words on behalf of the former minister, quickly. Owing to the fact that he represented Carriacou and Petite Martinique in the first instance as an independent candidate. And that's just remind me, the few words are an old saying which says that the stone that the builder refused sometimes become the head cornerstone. In this case, it almost became the head cornerstone because he was able to came closest to achieving the highest office in the land, which he became the deputy prime minister, and so on. And the fact that the opposition leader would have mentioned the whole thing about the linchpin, and so on. But Mr. President and Mr. Speaker, there's lessons to be learned about that, because it teaches us that we shouldn't give up. And perseverance is the key to success, because at one time he stood alone and came closest to achieving the highest position in the land. With all that said, Mr. President and Mr. Speaker, let me just say, may their souls rest in peace. Thank you.
St. Patrick West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, the House of Representatives, I rise this morning with a very heavy heart to pay tribute to a patriot, Honorable Elvin G. Nimrod. I also wish to take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, to extend condolences to his family, relatives, and friends, not only on my behalf, but on behalf of the people of St. Patrick, both East and West, recognizing that at one time, St. Patrick and Carriacou constituted one constituency. So we are all in it together. And while I'm at it, Mr. Speaker, let me also take this opportunity to extend condolences to my dear friend and leader of the opposition, Honorable Tobias Clement, on the passing of his dear mother. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, I must admit that for all these years, I never knew what the G stood for. In my humble opinion, I thought the G stood for God sent, because Elvin was indeed, to the people of Carriacou, a man sent by God. Mr. Speaker, I would like to use a quotation from a famous Caribbean personality to describe or to encapsulate the life of Elvin G. Nimrod. And it goes like this: to live for oneself is to live in vain, but to live for others is to live again. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, Elvin G. Nimrod's life was not about Nimrod himself. It was not about fame or fortune. Nimrod's life, Mr. Speaker, was about the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. Nimrod can be regarded as someone who was people-centered, Because everything he did, he focused on the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, on the welfare of the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. I can recall in the parliament, and it was said before, he said, I will die for the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. And this, Mr. Speaker, was not empty rhetoric. It was something that came from the heart. It came from deep within. That was how we felt. As a fellow, as we call ourselves, Kakababi, because we from Carriacou, we have this close-knitted relationship. I considered it an honor to have served in the same cabinet and in the same parliament with Honorable Elvin G. Nimrod. His contributions, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, have been well articulated by speakers who preceded me. But just to recall his contribution as a Foreign Affairs Minister and the work that was done, as was said by the member for the town of St. George, the re-engagement or re-establishment of diplomatic relations with China, and having to deal with the fallout with Taiwan, and those court cases with regards to outstanding monies owed to Taiwan. And Elvin Nimrod, as Minister of Foreign Affairs, did an excellent job in that regard. But he will be best remembered for his contribution to his beloved Carriacou and Petite Martinique. And foremost among those contributions, Mr. Speaker, achievements, I will highlight the human aspect. Education. Nimrod was relentless in his demand for scholarships for the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. There was not a time that he will not insist that Carriacou receive its fair share of scholarships. And who could have denied him in the manner in which he approached you? Very, very, I would say, it was just difficult to say, no, Nimrod, we can't give you more. When you look at the physical landscape of Carriacou today, Mr. Speaker, infrastructure, the roads, I see Nimrod. Just one example, where I was born in an area called Ravine. Last time I went up to Ravine and I saw a road, concrete road, and they said Nimrod constructed that road. I said, I can't believe it. I think I have a piece of land there, I'm going back and build a house there because of Nimrod's contribution in building that road. Mr. Speaker, land for the landless, those who did not possess lands. Nimrod was instrumental again in ensuring that those people got lands. And it was because of his outstanding contributions that, notwithstanding the fact that he won the Carriacou seat in 2003 by only 6 votes, in the next general elections in 2008, when the party lost, Nimrod won by an overwhelming majority, when only 4 NNP candidates won. And recognizing that 8-7 in 2003, he almost lost. Why? Because he devoted that time to the development of the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, and they rewarded him with a greater mandate. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, enough has been said, and I do not want to repeat what was said, but one thing, again, I want to say about Nimrod was his generosity, his kindness. Whenever we left Grenada, went up to Carriacou for whatever reason. We were well received by Nimrod. I recall, and I give you a story, and it's true. I recall Nimrod invited me up to assist him in a meeting in Mount Royal. And I stayed at his home in Hillsborough for the night. And the next morning, he woke up early and he cooked some nice saltfish. Saltfish and bakes with cocoa tea. And he said to me, I'm going out, Tony, help yourself. I am embarrassed. I helped myself to the extent that nobody who came after was able to help themselves. No, it was tasting so good, Mr. Speaker, I couldn't help myself. I was embarrassed afterwards, but I ate everything. So, Mr. Speaker, in summary, I want to end as I started, with a quotation, and this time from the great American writer Ernest Hemingway, in his famous novel, For Whom the Bell Tolls. And I paraphrase, no man is an island unto himself. Every man is a piece of this earth, and therefore, any man's death diminishes us all. So when you hear the church bell toll, never ask for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee, and it tolls for me. Today, Mr. Speaker, we are all diminished by the passing of our great friend, patriot, standing son of the soil of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. But as I said in the beginning, because Elvin Nimrod was not selfish, he will live again. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Sinclair.
Good morning, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, honorable members. I stand here given this opportunity to contribute to what I will say the experience, our experience, in that in my previous walk-ins, I have always say about Carriacou, even as a young boy, a lot of persons walk to Carriacou with their motorbikes and so on, because of the road issues. But when I was employed at the MNID, because there is an outlet out there, I had the opportunity to visit Carriacou. And I remember the first day I went, and I was like, how is the road? How is, it's different. And so understanding the contributions of Mr. Nimrod, Honorable Nimrod, in his passing, I have learned a lot by sitting here. And the hospitality of the persons in Carriacou and Petite Martinique, I know is very good. And with his exceptional hospitality, I could understand why, because it always needs to be competitive and set a good example. I speak here today on behalf of the fisher folks, agriculture sector, and of course, throughout the length and breadth of Grenada. They would, in their own ways, have been touched by the various activities, policies, and so on that Mr. Nimrod would have, in quote, as was said, fought for, begged for, used special languages to lobby. And this is good. So I know that they might be smiling with their personal stories. I personally haven't met him or know him. The closest I know about him in Carriacou is, I remember going around and they said, this is where Minister Nimrod lives. I'm not too sure if it's a true story because I didn't validate it. So what I learned here today, it's even for my own self and for others within this country, that we need to live a good life. We need to live a life where, as we sit here today and reminisce, it creates a further example for others. I listen the children, I would say, of Mr. Nimrod, of Senator Cox and Sister Maturin and the others. And it tells us we need to live a good life. And I feel very humbled to be part of this experience, because in that way, as Brother Jordan said earlier on, it gives us an example by which we can make our contribution. So in this regards, to his family, his friends, both local and overseas, I want to, on behalf of, I will say, my constituents, who I sit here for, say that in a time of sorrow, you know, in a community, you may look at your family and your immediate community. But as a statesman who has passed, the whole of Grenada, including the diaspora, is by your side, is there for you. The connections that you'd have made during the foreign ministries throughout the world, I know they are also would have their blessings for you, the family, and of course Grenada, as we go through this moment. I want to take this opportunity as I stand here also to express to our honorable leader of the opposition the passing of his mom. It's perhaps one of the greatest loss you can face in that connectivity, because it's where you come from. And we know Carriacou, you have lost 2 persons, but at the end of the day, the Lord knows how to comfort persons in a time of grief. Thank you.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I stand today to make my contribution to this motion on the great life that Brother Elvin Nimrod lived. Let me also express condolences to the leader of the opposition on the passing of his mom. I've listened to the tribute and decided to take a different approach and reflect on my personal engagement with Minister Nimrod, because I first encountered him as a public servant. I was the Director of Trade when the Ministry of Foreign Affairs was merged and became Foreign Affairs and International Trade. So I served as Director of Trade. And 2 years after serving as Director of Trade, in 2016, Minister Nimrod said, I'm recommending you to be the Permanent Secretary. He said, because I see leadership in you. And in life, in order to make it sometimes, you need people who identify potential in you. And that is what Minister Nimrod was good at. He said, I see the potential in you, and therefore you will make a good permanent secretary for me. And we attended all his regional and international meetings where he was highly respected for the contribution he made. One thing I know about him is that he took the job as Foreign Affairs very serious, because he's representing the state. And he always had that in the back of his mind, you know. He said, Minister, when I speak, I'm representing this, not only the government, but the state of Grenada. And therefore, I must portray myself in a particular manner. And he always encouraged me and gave me good advice. I believe he was a man with a strong vision and commitment. And when you look at the sacrifice he made to serve his constituency in South Grenada, he was one of the longest serving foreign affairs ministers. And for good reasons, because he did an excellent job in that position. And when I retired from the public service, and he approached me and he said, I think you should go now enter politics. I said, no, you're stretching it too much. No, not politics. I said, I am not prepared to make that level of sacrifice right now in my life. And there is this famous quote that I wrote it down when I was preparing, that he used to convince me. He said, a ship in the harbor is safe, but that is not what ship is built for. Ship wasn't built to stay in the harbor. So I went and I Googled, because that's not his quote, he took it from somewhere else. And the explanation for this quote is, get out of your comfort zone to grow and fulfill your potential. That is what the quote means, you know. I said, well, why? I fulfilled my potential. I'm a permanent secretary. I served for 30 years. I will work as a regional civil servant. And my next step was to go on to the international scene. He said, no, come and serve your country. And he brought me to the leader, and the party was in opposition at the time. And my friends from Barbados telling me, you go in the politics and you join in an opposition party. I said, well, there is no other party for me to join. I have to join a party that represents the working class. That's the only reason. I say I served in the labor movement, and I have to identify with a party that's for workers and the working class. That's why I join in the party. I say, that's all right, if I lose, I will find a job. I'm qualified enough to get a job. And it was Mr. Nimrod. So from the permanent secretary, 2006, 2008, because I lost the election in 2008. We then served in the same cabinet in 2013. Minister Nimrod said he was so happy to be sitting side by side in cabinet now with me. He said, you're a real asset to the cabinet. Always encouraging me, always motivating me to go on. And we have this adversarial we debated and thing, and I said, why? And I will give you a next quote of his. He said, and I quote, adversity and loss make a man wise. Again, I go and I Google that. I say, let me see what that means. And the meaning is, we gain wisdom faster in difficult times than in prosperous times. You see how much wisdom he has and he imparted? Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, is a great loss to Grenada, not only to CARICOM, to Grenada. Brother Elvin Nimrod. Don't think I could ever walk in the shoe. I could never fit as foreign minister. The current foreign minister now never knew, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, that one day I'll be serving in the capacity as foreign minister. Minister Nimrod said you had the potential to grow. So come out from your comfort zone and fulfill your dreams and your potential. But I said, everybody have the role in life, and we are all sent here for a purpose. I say, if it is my purpose, I will fulfill the mission given by God. And there he opened up my thinking, and to serve is no greater service than serving in this parliament. You know what you have to give up? You know how Minister Nimrod gave up to come and serve here for 20 years? When Minister Nimrod died, we had before, we went up to CARICOM retreat. And I had to use, I had to get back to the hotel. And Minister Nimrod told me use his vehicle. When Minister Nimrod gave me the vehicle, I said, but I thought when you get old, you need a nice, posh vehicle. That is the vehicle you have. The man may sacrifice his whole life. So live so humble and quiet. And no, he was not in it for the gains, for prosperity, and just a humble life. And I think a man like that must be rewarded. And he's a strong believer, strong Anglican, and I know his faith is strong. And he believes that in eternal life, and based on the life that he lives, I'm sure that God will reward him. And so today, as I pay tribute to him, they said I had to cut it because this is not the occasion to eulogize his life. It's just to pay tribute. So, to his family, friends, all the people from Carriacou, his successor, who is always emulating his life, I want to say to you, rest assured that he is in a better place. So they say, rest in peace, my friend. Rest in perfect peace until we meet again.
Honorable Parliamentary Representative of George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give total support to the motion as presented by the Prime Minister and associated by the Senate. I also take the opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to join the members of the Senate and other members of the House of Representatives in recognizing the contribution made by the late Honorable Nimrod, my friend, my colleague, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, the way the late Elvin Nimrod integrated into the team of the new National Party's administration in 1996, when we were both in the Senate. His tenacity, his way of serving has been articulated by many persons, many of them from the context of the House of Representatives. But since 1995 for me, 1997 for my colleague, we did what we have to do in representing at the upper level of the chambers of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. And since then, we remain extremely close friends, Mr. Speaker. But one of the main issues, his highlight, Mr. Speaker, is a comradeship, a team player. He came from an independent side into the administration, and Mr. Speaker, and everyone recognized that this is someone with whom we can work. And it was not only within the confines of the Parliament, Mr. Speaker. We have heard it from the wider sector of his constituency, Mr. Speaker, and from the national standpoint. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, our relationship was characterized, in addition to representation for his people in Carriacou and Petite Martinique, serious discussions on national issues. So he was much wider than Carriacou and Petite Martinique, his constituency, Mr. Speaker. He sought my advice on many matters, not because he did not know, but because he wanted a different perspective. And he wanted more information, Mr. Speaker, so that he can go out there and articulate well for Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique in many areas that he served, Mr. Speaker. And that's another solid attribute, Mr. Speaker, that I took away from him. And many of us getting a different perspective so that when you speak, you will be listened to and you will be heard, Mr. Speaker. His contribution in the fields of labor, foreign affairs, and legal affairs must be commended. I remember in 2005, Mr. Speaker, he called me from a distance away when he was embarking on that important mission mentioned by many others before of re-establishing relationship, Mr. Speaker, with mainland China. I remember the long and deep discussions as leader of government's business, Mr. Speaker, in the House on the operations of negative and positive resolutions. And even today, Mr. Speaker, I can really hold my end in dealing with the legal department and how things should be done with respect to operationalizing of many laws, many legislations, and many resolutions that come before myself, Mr. Speaker. A legacy of his outstanding work and the personality, Mr. Speaker. I extend to him and his family, including, Mr. Speaker, people of Carriacou and the Petite Martinique, and to the nation, because I want all of us to understand that he was broader than Carriacou and the Petite Martinique. All condolences, Mr. Speaker, to them and to us as well, because we too are feeling his loss. We're missing him as a person. And he was definitely a humble and down-to-earth person with whom everyone could cooperate, could collaborate, and coordinate, Mr. Speaker. I want to take this opportunity as to extend publicly, I've already done so, Mr. Speaker, to the leader of the opposition, the sincerest condolences on the passing of his mother. As I told him, for the first time I saw a lady who just looked at me and called me the leader of government business. I said to him that she has been following, or she was following what the matters that's going on in her country. So, Mr. Speaker, I wish to end by again recognizing the contribution made by our former colleagues and to wish again his family, friends, and people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique in particular my greatest sympathies. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Parliamentary Representative for St. George Southeast. I must take this opportunity to join in our condolences. Let me start by saying to the leader of the opposition, I feel your pain. And you know, when pain is recent, you feel it stronger. But courage, my brother. They are just gone for a while. I am told that this is not the end. In 1997, I was serving as the Chief Education Officer for the Ministry of Education. And one Monday morning, and I'm someone who makes sure I'm there before 8 o'clock, I walk into the office and there was a gentleman sitting there. It was the Honorable Elvin Nimrod. He came to introduce himself to me and to find out if I'm acquainted with Carriacou. How well did I know Carriacou? We had a little discussion because I've been to Carriacou a few times before as a cadet camping and so on. And he asked me if I ever visited the schools in Carriacou. But I had not yet visited the schools in Carriacou. He said, well, you must put that high up on your agenda. I said, okay. He said, because you know, I'll be coming back again. And maybe about 2 months afterwards, he was back to find out if I did have a chance to go to Carriacou. Because he started to now outline the things that he needed in education in Carriacou. I said, well, I am just a Chief Education Officer. He said, according to the law, the responsibility for the education of the people of the state rests in your hands. So make sure we have a better conversation next time. I tried. When I left there and went to the Ministry of Works, that is when we became friends. Because we would be seeing each other on a monthly basis. The road here, the bridge there, the drain there, the school building here, and all those parts that had to be fixed. Brother Elvin Nimrod would be at the office. I said, well, go talk to your colleague. Talk to your colleague. Look at Brother Greg, they go talk to the man now? He said, yes, but you are the permanent secretary. And we had a conversation that would last maybe 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes. But then I would have to run to the minister at the time, Honorable Gregory Bowen, to say, watch, please, let's see what we can do. I can't take it no more. But he would be back next week anyway. And once I remember him saying to me, the Prime Minister said there is no money. The Minister for Finance said there is no money. But how could I go back to Carriacou and tell them that we have no money? See where you could get it, eh? He was my real friend. The only friend that would try to find out if my liquor cabinet was full or empty. And that was not because of bribe. That was not because of bribe, just to make sure that it was replenished. And it was replenished. So I'm saying this to say that my think about replenishing. Honorable members, we have lost a hero. But it is said that heroes don't die. They transition. And think of them as a silk cotton tree. The blossoms and the seeds fly many distances away. So his legacy that would remain, I'm sure, will stand in good stead for Carriacou, because Carriacou is not the same that I knew in 1965. My first trip to Carriacou. Now you go to Carriacou, you go to a little paradise. So may God rest his soul and may he find the light as he travels on his new journey. Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, I stand on this very special occasion to give the final tribute in closing this motion as I presented earlier on. My presentation on this will be more of a personal nature, as one of the members did express the long-standing personal relationship that existed between himself and I. Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, this was around 1993 that I had the opportunity. I heard about the name Elvin Nimrod from the Caracunians, P.D. Martinicans in New York. I never met him, but some part of 1993 I had the opportunity to meet him. And at that time there was an expression by the people there that he had strong interest in political representation for the people of Carriacou and P.D. Martinique. And the NNP political organization that I then, at that time, led, having had problems with the other factions of the NNP before that, having replaced the NNP parliamentarian, Howard Blaze, I was not the most welcome person in Carriacou at that time. So I had to build back something for the people of Carriacou and P.D. Martinique. And so I heard about Nimrod's popularity and of course,
support. So I did call him and indicated that I wished to have a discussion. We met, talked, but I got the clear impression, I think it was already expressed today, that he did not want to join any of the existing political party. And the least of them would have been the NNP, who had little or no connection in Carriacou at the time. So he proceeded to attach his name to the list of candidates in the 1995 general elections. But during the period, we knew that he had serious support from the people as an independent candidate. And the member, the opposition leader, is correct when he said there were 6 persons running in that general elections. You had the GLP candidate, the TNP candidate, Tobias Clement representing the NNP. Then you had the independent candidate, Nimrod. You had the NDC candidate. So you had 6. So we proceeded to do a number of scientific surveys leading up to the general elections and found out that the independent candidate was leading in the survey. And that wasn't surprising because you knew he had very popular support. And the second person behind was the NDC candidate, Joan Pussell. I remember calling Elvin. I said to him, Elvin, you are ahead. But my own experience of politics and associating support in scientific surveys, the percentage was about 7 points ahead of Joan Pussell. And that was about 2-3 months before the elections. I said to him, do not rest on your laurels. Because as the period comes closer to the election, people start asking questions. What are you going to do with that independent candidacy? Who will you support if you win? And of course, a party win the majority. Who will you support? See, when this thing comes down to the wire, people start having second thoughts. So we are doing rolling surveys. And every 2 weeks we did a survey. Joan Pussell is gaining a point, and another point and a half, and another point. 2 weeks before the elections, it was almost a dead heat. I called Nimrod. I said to him, Elvin, you don't know much about scientific surveys, but I'm telling you, the people want you as a representative, but they're having serious question marks. You may not win, not because they do not believe you're the best candidate, but because they have doubts as to where you will go. So I said to him, Tobias Clement is representing the NNP. He has literally no chance of winning. But he's from Piti Martinique. And suspicion, and we knew that he was going to get a lot of family support in Piti Martinique. So I said to him, let us advise Tobias to lie low and encourage his supporters quietly, because he couldn't do it publicly, to support you. He said to me, he said, Doc, do not worry. We are going to win. Toby's a good boy, so solid, and you should not interfere with the young man. Let him proceed. As truth has it, as the results had it, he lost. by 23 votes. Toby said 19. It was 23 votes. Toby got 150 votes in Petite Martinique. So if we take a little 50 out of that, Nimrod would have been the representative in Carriacou and Petite Martinique. So, the government, we won the election, 8-7. Nimrod, the most popular person in Carriacou, is not the representative. Tobias was appointed as parliamentary secretary for the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique and senator in the parliament of the country. So over a period of time, 95 to 96, we're in constant discussions. And people are saying, look, the gentleman has the support of the people. It makes sense to involve him at some level for the development of the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. The question is, how do we do this? We already have a senator from Carriacou and Petite Martinique who is in Tobias Clement. So I called Tobias, and this is his story. And I said, we have to talk. That was late 95, early 96. And I said to Tobias, look, you're a young man. Politics is a serious and dangerous business. Go and fortify yourself educationally. Strengthen your hand independently with education, because I ran for election at 24 years. But I made it clear to Mr. Blazen, win or lose, that I'm going to study. Because I wanted to fortify myself before I commit fully to politics. So I gave him my story. I went abroad, fortified myself educationally, worked, attained a level of financial independence. Then I returned home at the peak of my financial life. So I told him, Mr. Tobias was reluctant because a young man, the senator thing was nice, and so on, and the honorable member of parliament. So why not? So there was reluctance. I spoke to him. We talked over and over, and finally we organized for him to study, to go abroad and fortify himself. And Nimrod was appointed in the Senate and became the parliamentary representative for Carriacou and Petite Martinique and Minister of Legal Affairs. Well, Honorable Gregory Boyne was made also senator at the time in the government and made Minister of Works. I'm making these 2 points because something critical happened afterwards. The government of the day then, we had 8 parliamentarians. And the harsh reality was, you have to run the country. So, when I looked to the team, I realized that we needed to bring in members from the Senate to help us to manage ministries. Because there is a perception that because I win my seat, I must run ministry. That is a general, even I think up to today, have that sort of mindset. And that's why the founding fathers of the system always said the Senate can be used to help you to manage government. So when we are elected as a parliamentary representative, we are elected to represent our constituency, not to manage no ministry. You may be asked by the Prime Minister of the day to take on the responsibility, but it becomes something historical over the years that some of us, when we become an elected member, we must run a ministry. And if somebody is a senator and they are given a ministry to run and I'm not running one, something is wrong. So you can imagine what I had to face in 95 to 99. Sometimes cabinet meetings were like a war. People don't know this story. Oh, this man didn't win no seat. I win the seat of this man is a big minister. I will not call names, but I'm making a point for what it's worth. And I remember one day, after we had a torrid time at cabinet, Nimrod came outside with me, put his hand on my shoulder. He said to me, I don't know how you make it, you know. You're really strong. I realize you're getting a lot of licks from me and Bowen, because clearly they had senior position in government, especially Gregory, who was running what everybody considered one of the key ministries of government, the Ministry of Works. So that was the point I'm really making is Nimrod understood what I was going through. He understood the decision that I made was in the interest of the country, not of myself, and not of himself or the other member, Honorable Gregory Bowen at the time, but what was best for the country, attempting to manage the affairs of the country. Now, the second point I want to make about that period, I learned over a period of time there were a number of activities happening in the sister Isle of Petite Martinique. That was not sounding good, and that because there were no customs in Caribou, in Petite Martinique, no customs department, there were no security, no police station, nothing in Petite Martinique. So I said, well, how can we run a country with one part of the country there is no police station, no customs? I was less concerned about customs. I was more concerned about security. So the decision was made that we must have some security unit in Petite Martinique. So I consulted regional governments that we needed to do this because there were stories that other countries were facing from activities in that part of the country of Grenada. The decision was made that we must take steps. The question is, how do you do it with the history of Petite Martinique, having it been able to do what they wish? And no one is there to institute law as we know it in other parts of the country or other parts of the region. So I realized the problem was a serious one, but we had to take a decision. So I know if we attempted to go to Carriacou, Petite Martinique, and start to talk about a police station, there will be problems. We found that out, there will be problems. So I had to call in Nimrod. I called in Nimrod because he's then the parliamentary secretary for Carriacou and Petite Martinique, and also a person that was very popular in Carriacou. Not maybe as popular in Petite Martinique, but very popular in Carriacou, and by implication, the combined Carriacou and Petite Martinique. So I said to him, I gave him the whole story, what was happening, the security issues involved, and I said, I can't do it without you. If you don't support me and support this, I can't do it. And it's going to be a problem and a blot on the government and our period of service. After I spoke to him, he listened carefully, and he said to me, Prime Minister, leadership is not a simple thing. This must be done, and I will be with you, and I will be with the country. I will speak to the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, I know some will not like it, but I will brave the weather. And I will never forget going to Carriacou, and Nimrod stood up in a public meeting. And that is when I gained the greatest respect for him, because I could not say then. And he said, he laid a foundation about responsibility. It was one of the best speech I have heard from a representative over the years. He was clear, he was strong, powerful to the people and to the country. And I sat there and listened, and I said, that is leadership. There were some grumbling. So 2 weeks later, the decision was to go to Peter Martinique to announce that we're having a police station. Well, security information came back. Your life in danger. If you're thinking of going to Peter Martinique to establish a police station, your life is in danger, my friends. And meanwhile, we had regional security people warning me personally of statements coming out of Peter Martinique. So I had to decide. And the sad thing, and I think it was mentioned, I think by the present representative, that the opposition in Grenada at the time was not demonstrating that level of responsibility that you expected on a serious issue of security. And I've always said, and Nimrod always will articulate this, there's some issues, colleagues, and all of us must remember this. Nimrod is gone, and we're going one day. We have to leave this house one day. And we must always remember our responsibility. First, is to what is right. It is not always what is popular. When you are right, and you do what you know is right, and people are clear that it's not games we are playing, you never lose permanent support. You may lose temporary support. People learn to respect you if you stand on principle and you stay with it. You take the necessary licks that come at the moment, but you do not change over a period of time and play games. People don't leave you permanently. So, we decided we are going to Peter Martinique. Well, I had to bring up a whole boatload of SSU. Seriously. SSU for so. Going to Peter Martinique. I've never seen more cross faces in my life. We are turning the sword for this police station. If we had 5 people from Peter Martinique close by us, we had a lot, but all the people on the periphery, mad. And Nimrod is standing there with me. That was the scene. Meanwhile, the opposition leading a demonstration in Grenada. The opposition in Grenada, leading a demonstration through the market in St. George's, how are going to destroy the people of Peter Martinique and all kinds of stuff. They ain't come to Peter Martinique to do it. They stay in Grenada, St. George's, making trouble. Nimrod stood his ground. Police station was built. We had a section for some aspect of customs, limited as it was, but that, as I said, was a secondary issue. And the station was built. And we got our friends regionally and internationally to say we need help. So they organized basketball court in Petite Martinique, desalination plant to bring water to the people and so on, and during the period of the building of the police station. So by the time the police station was built, there was a level of understanding. So when we went back to formally open, there was still hostility from the people, but there was more clearer understanding of the necessity. That is how the police station was built in Petite Martinique, and Elvin Nimrod, more than I, and the government, had to give the greatest credit, because without his support, we would not have been brave enough to go there. So I make this point and repeat it for what it's worth as a lesson to all of us young, the young parliamentarians coming to serve, to always remember to stand for what is right, not what you believe is popular. Always. So, as it happened, we lost the election. We lost one member of our parliament in 1998, late. The history of that is known. And therefore we had to have a general election in 1999. So Nimrod ran with the New National Party, and therefore we being victorious. You remember, that was the first clean sweep of the NNP in 1999. Colleagues, Carriacou was transformed between 1999 and 2003. The history of Carriacou and Petite Martinique is simply this. Before that period, and it was said, I can't remember which member said it, there were 2 prime ministers from Carriacou before, and Petite Martinique. No roads. I remember as Minister of Communication in the first NNP government in 1984, when we decided to get a new telephone system, because PRG left us with a crossbar system, which was an obsolete system. So we had a modern Northern Telecom. The Canadian government gave us the money to build a modern telephone system. So I told Mr. Blaise, when he goes to Carriacou on weekend, we lost connection with the Prime Minister. There was no telephone connection. I said, we want to put the modern system, the digital system, in Carriacou first. Mr. Blaise tell me, don't try it, don't do that. The people will be mad with him. I said, they can't be mad with the Prime Minister being given connection to the country as a priority. I said, let me take the leaks. That's how Carriacou and Petite Martinique became the first part of the island to receive the modern telephone system. So Carriacou didn't have roads. Telephone, electricity was a joke, only certain parts. Nimrod, under his leadership, 1999 to 2003, modernized Carriacou and Petite Martinique. All the roads through all the different sections that you've seen. The fact is, we spent millions and millions of dollars. And you know, the thing is, as I mentioned a while ago, historically, the GLP government before, during the period, never got much votes in Carriacou. So the GLP government wrote off Carriacou and Petite Martinique as far as when they were in office. There was hardly anything done in Carriacou and Petite Martinique because they never expected votes. And since the Carriacou representative, when they got into office as Prime Minister, did not do much, so it means that the place was left without serious development. So Nimrod has to get most of the credit, and that is the point I'm making here today, for the transformation of Carriacou as a modern part of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. He has to be given credit. But in the process of all that work, and that's another message I want to give to the young parliamentarians that Nimrod understood, got to understand. From 1999 to 2003, all the roads, telephone all over the place, electricity, even attempt to bring in water services. Yet in 2003, he barely won by 6 votes. What is the message there, colleagues? Don't believe that you can just build roads, do all the work, and don't connect on the ground. You can still lose. And that has happened a lot of times with parliamentarians. It is not just the work. When people receive the service, they already said, that's his job. But if you don't connect on the ground with them. So I remember meeting with Nimrod after the election. I said, do you realize you've done more work than any of us in our constituency on the mainland? And he said that one hit him hard. So we sat, and I gave him my understanding of how I built connection in my own constituency, because people don't know this. In 1984 when I ran, I only got 60% of the votes. So I built that by connecting with people, particularly the areas I felt I did not do well in, one-on-one. I said, you need to go back and build that connection. Colleagues, when we lost in 2008, and I think someone said it already, the only representative that increased their support from 2003 to 2008 when we lost, it was Elvin Nimrod. I had 87% of the votes in 99. Sorry, 91% of the votes in 1999 and 2003. So it's 87, and in 2008 I got 84. So I lost also. Nimrod was the only representative who increased his support in his constituency from 2003 to 2008 when we ended up in opposition. And the story of being in opposition is well known. Colleagues, that election loss was a lesson. I remember in opposition then, the Speaker of the House then, I won't call him, everyone should know, had a certain problem with me as leader of the opposition. And he then became transferred to Nimrod also, because in opposition, the Speaker, at the end of parliamentary debates, he used to give, he says he's giving the Ben Jones Award for the best delivery and presentation. And he will never, with all the presentation of Nimrod and whatever I did, you know who was getting the award? And I see him starting to smile. Honorable Roland Bowler. Because Roland Bowler had a way, when he giving you political licks, he's making a nice statement to make you feel nice otherwise. So, but what Nimrod and the opposition leader speak, it was licks down the line. So he had a strong problem with both myself and Elvin Nimrod, but he was passionate, very passionate throughout his entire period. Whether it's in government, Nimrod got up and speak. You could have felt the passion with which he spoke. And I think he would always be remembered for the level of presentation and debates which took place during his period of service. And you know, during his ministerial responsibilities, legal affairs, attorney general, foreign affairs, labor. My friends, the personal experiences that I had with Nimrod is this. It is said that you never see him vexed. I saw him got vexed already. But you know, he never had the hatred that some of us bring into politics. We have debate. You criticize, and that's a right. It's good for the country. It's good for the parliament. But some of us carry it outside of the house into personal things, deep personal attacks, which is so unnecessary. Nimrod never got into this. The Honorable Peter David, it was clear, and he's right. I saw them hugging up and laughing after a parliamentary session with Nimrod shared no flicks. He gave, Nimrod gave, but they were hugging afterwards. That is what the politics should be about. We should not carry our personal political feelings at a level outside that we can divide our people. I mean, in the United States today, we're talking about this. And Nimrod and I spoke a lot about this too. This idea of this personal thing, where we can divide our country and get people to fight one another and so on, that does not make sense in the final analysis. We have to live together. This is a family in Grenada. It's a family society. We end up sometimes hurting one another's family simply because we hurt an individual. The biggest problem that I know, and Nimrod felt strongly about that the country had over the years, was the division among people for political problems. When the GLP lost a lot of political support because when you hurt one person, you believe it's one person, sometimes it's a village you hurt. The biggest fault of the revolution was not in policy, not in programs, but the pain of hurting individuals. And I believe most of the persons who supported the revolution, including me, learned that lesson. That you do not hurt people beyond the political views you express, which may be different from theirs, passionately so. Because in the final analysis, you may be hunting your own brother and your own sister. That's the message Nimrod would have left us. Finally, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, one of the more difficult periods, and that's something all of us have to learn. I watched him and I saw some of the physical issues, and I approached him. And I think it's something that all of us, as we traverse this path, colleagues, we all have to think about our own period of service, and knowing that this is a time, there is no permanency in this, and we are not in charge of our own destiny. We have to prepare ourselves for leaving this place. I'm speaking to myself and speaking to everybody. And it was tough. I know it was tough for him. And it will be tough for every one of us deciding to leave a position of responsibility that you love in terms of service. It can't be easy, and it won't be easy. We spoke in the decision that he himself came to, that he should recommend someone else to move forward as representing the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique. It's a difficult one for me, for him. And we discussed, and he said, look, at the end of this, our service should not end when we leave this house if we are still alive and physically well. If we have all these years of experience and a government office, whether it's opposition or government, and they don't want to use your experience, then they would have been the ones that losing, not us. Those of us who've served in this place for a long time have something to give to others, whether in government or opposition, and we should feel free to give it. We don't have to always be in a position of authority to provide service. And I spoke about his being advisor to the government at the end of his period of service when the election was held and the results came out. And we agreed, and he had indicated a medical attention that he was seeking abroad, and when he returned and was comfortable and felt that he passed the worst stage, that he would in fact get back to me to indicate when he could start. Unfortunately, that never happened. And many times I called and was sometimes not able to get him, and I would call some of my other friends in the parliament and outside his friends, and found out that sometimes I did not even know when he left. And that this is a painful part of this entire exercise, that I didn't have the opportunity to at least be able to see him and speak to him in those final period. I think I want to leave us with this message. And this is, during this time, make no enemies. I repeat, Nimrod did not leave enemies. I will not leave enemies. The message of men of life and service is one. And the last one, every day, make it one more day in preparation for our departure from this house. That is Nimrod's legacy, and that is the legacy all of us must leave. I want to therefore express sympathy to his family, immediate family, and the entire family of Carriacou and Petite Martinique for his service, for his passing, His remains is now in Miami. Immediate family had been in touch up to yesterday to indicate their plans to bring the body back to Grenada, hopefully next week. Certain things that have to be done. And negotiations and preparation for service and a funeral in Carriacou would also be made. The team of public servants are now working with the family in preparation for those days. Colleagues, we've lost a brother. We have lost a friend. May his soul rest in peace. Goodbye, my brother. Thank you.
Question proposed is that the motion moved by the Honorable Prime Minister, associated with and to by the Leader of Government's Business and by the Senate, be now approved. Honorable members, the question is that the motion be approved. All those who are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. To the contrary opinion, say nay. Honorable members of the Senate, I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it.
Honorable members of the House of Representatives, the question is that the motion moved by the Prime Minister at the joint sitting of the Senate and the House of Representatives held at Parliament Building, Mount Weldale, to pay tribute to Elvin Nimrod be now approved. Honorable members, those who are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary opinion, say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Honorable members, let me invite you to now please stand and pay tribute for a moment of silence. May his soul rest in peace.
Amen.
Pray be seated. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I beg to move the adjournment of these honorable houses sine die.
Honorable members of both houses, the question is that the Houses of Parliament be adjourned sine die. All those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Honorable members, the House now stands, the Houses of Parliament now stand adjourned sine die.
hold it, hold it.
Help to sing